Kithril arrived at the cafe exactly at 7 in the morning. She was young for a Velkari assassin, only 15 years into her training. This was her first major contract, the one that would establish her reputation. She should have been focused on the kill. Instead, she found herself nervous about a conversation. Morrison and Zithrak were already waiting at their usual table. 3 cups of coffee steamed in the morning air. The human gestured to the empty chair with the same casual friendliness that had disarmed Zithrak a year ago. "You must be Kithril," Morrison said as she sat down. "Welcome to New Portland. That's your coffee. Fair warning, it's an acquired taste." Kithril studied them both with her 6 eyes. Zithrak looked different than his official files suggested, more relaxed. His posture was less rigid, his expression less cold. The human beside him seemed completely unconcerned about sitting between 2 trained killers. "You are not afraid," she observed. "Been through this before?" Morrison replied. "Your mentor here had the same reaction when we first met. Turns out conversation works better than shooting." "Who knew?" "Zithrak is not my mentor. He is a traitor to our people. I am here to restore our reputation." "By killing me?" Zithrak asked calmly. "Yes. And the human who corrupted you." Morrison sipped his coffee. "Before you do that, I'm curious. What did they tell you about why Zithrak changed?" Kithril recited the official report. He was compromised by emotional manipulation. He allowed sentiment to override his training. He failed his contract and encouraged others to do the same. "He has damaged the Velkari reputation across 17 star systems." "That's one way to describe it," Morrison agreed. "Here's another version. Zithrak learned that there are things more important than killing. He discovered purpose beyond contracts. He chose to value life instead of ending it. And yeah, he's been sharing that perspective with other assassins who were tired of meaningless violence." "There is no such thing as meaningless violence. Every contract serves a purpose, does it?" Zithrak asked. "I thought the same thing once. I had completed 500 contracts before I came here. Can you tell me what purpose any of them served? What changed in the galaxy because of those deaths?" Kithril opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. She realized she didn't know. The contracts were just names and payments in a file. Targets eliminated for reasons she had never questioned. "The contracts maintain order," she finally said. "They remove problems. They enforce consequences. They make wealthy people slightly wealthier," Morrison countered gently. "They settle business disputes with murder. They silence inconvenient voices. That's not order. That's just violence with a price tag. You do not understand our way." "Maybe not," Morrison admitted, "but I understand what Zithrak was before and what he chose to become. I understand that 7 other assassins made the same choice after talking with him. I understand that this colony is safer and happier because of those choices. So before you restore your reputation by killing us, maybe you should understand what you're actually destroying." Kithril wanted to refuse, wanted to stand up and complete her contract immediately. But curiosity held her in her chair. The same curiosity that had made her send that message. The same curiosity that had brought her to this cafe. "One day," she heard herself say, "I will observe for one day. Then I will make my decision." Morrison smiled. "That's all we're asking." "Zithrak, you want to give her the tour?" The next hours passed in a way Kithril had never experienced. Zithrak took her through the colony, showing her everything Morrison had shown him. The memorial garden with its trees of sacrifice, the school with its children learning to help each other, the medical center where doctors fought death every day. But Zithrak also showed her something else. The other former assassins living in the colony. Vexcor, now working as a night security officer who told Kithril about the relief of no longer having to kill. Kriath, teaching self-defense classes at the community center, who described finding purpose in protecting rather than destroying. Each one shared their story. Each one explained their choice. None of them seemed weak or corrupted. They seemed content in ways Kithril had never seen in active assassins. "You all abandoned your purpose," she said to the group gathered in Zithrak's apartment that evening. "We found a better purpose," Vexcor corrected. "I spent 20 years killing people I didn't know for reasons I didn't care about. Now I protect people I've come to know and care about. Tell me which one sounds more meaningful." "But the contracts, the payments, the reputation. What good is reputation without satisfaction?" Kriath asked. "What good is payment if you have nothing worth spending it on?" What good are contracts if they leave you empty inside? Kithral had no answer. These questions had never occurred to her during training. Velkari were taught to suppress such thoughts to focus only on the mission. Morrison arrived at the apartment carrying bags of food from various colony restaurants. Figured you all might be hungry. I brought a variety. Kithral, you should try the noodles from Chen's place. They're amazing. They ate together, the group of former assassins and one human. Conversation flowed easily around the table. Stories were shared. Jokes were made. At one point, Vexcor laughed so hard she nearly choked on her food, and 3 others rushed to help her. Kithral watched this with growing confusion. These were supposed to be the galaxy's deadliest predators. Cold, efficient, without emotion, yet here they were, laughing and caring about each other's well-being. I do not understand, she said quietly to Zithrak. How did this happen? Morrison showed me that connection is not weakness, Zithrak replied. He showed me that caring about others gives life meaning. He was not afraid of death, so he was free to live fully. That freedom was contagious, but we are Velkari. We are designed to be solitary hunters. We were trained to be solitary, Zithrak corrected. Training can be changed. Choices can be made. You are sitting here having this conversation instead of completing your contract. That is already a choice. Later that night, Morrison walked Kithral back toward her ship. The colony was quiet under the stars, peaceful in a way she found unsettling. Your contract includes Zithrak and me, Morrison said. If you kill us both, you'll get a substantial payment. Your reputation will be established. The Velkari Council will praise you. Everything will go according to plan. Yes, Kithral agreed. But then what? You'll go back to your ship alone. Take another contract. Kill more people you don't know for reasons you don't question. Spend your whole life like that until eventually someone better or luckier than you completes a contract on you. Is that really what you want? It is what I was trained for. That's not what I asked. Training tells you what you can do. Choice tells you what you should do. What do you want, Kithral? She stopped walking and stared up at the stars. What did she want? No one had ever asked her that question before. Her entire life had been about what she should do, must do, was expected to do. I do not know, she admitted. That's okay, Morrison said gently. Not knowing is the first step to figuring it out. Take your time. The contract isn't going anywhere, but maybe while you're deciding, ask yourself if you've ever been as content as Zithrak and the others seem to be. Ask yourself if payment is worth more than peace. Kithral spent the night in her ship, unable to sleep. Her weapons were ready. Her targeting systems were calibrated. She could complete the contract in the morning. 2 clean shots. Morrison and Zithrak eliminated. Mission complete. But Morrison's question kept echoing in her mind. What do you want? She thought about the memorial garden, about children learning to help each other, about former assassins laughing around a dinner table, about Zithrak's clear eyes and calm demeanor, so different from the cold efficiency she had been taught to value. She thought about her own training, the isolation, the constant pressure to perform, the emptiness that came after each successful contract. She had always assumed that emptiness was normal, that all assassins felt it. But Zithrak and the others didn't seem empty anymore. They seemed full of purpose and connection, and something she was beginning to recognize as happiness. Morning came. Kithral made her decision. She found Morrison and Zithrak at the cafe, 3 coffee cups already waiting. She sat down and picked up her cup. I am terminating my contract, she said. I cannot kill you when I do not understand why you should die, and I do not wish to return to a life where such questions are discouraged. Morrison's smile was warm and genuine. Welcome to New Portland. We're glad you're staying. I did not say I was staying. You will, Zithrak said with certainty, because now you have seen an alternative. You cannot unsee it. The question is not whether you will stay, but what you will do while you are here. He was right. Kithral knew she couldn't go back to her old life. Not now. Not after seeing what was possible. Over the following weeks, she joined the community of former assassins, learned to interact with humans and other species without evaluating them as targets, discovered that she enjoyed teaching others about security, sharing her knowledge in ways that protected rather than harmed. She planted her tree in the memorial garden 3 months later. A young willow, its branches already beginning to droop gracefully. As she patted soil around its roots, 3 weeks after Zithrak refused his contract, the second assassin arrived. Her name was Vexcor, a Krell shadow hunter known for her patience and precision. The Krell were different from the Velkari. Where Zithrak's people relied on physical superiority and technology, the Krell used stealth and poison. They could wait for months to find the perfect moment to strike. Zithrak detected her presence on the second day of her surveillance. A faint chemical signature in the air near Morrison's apartment. A barely visible disturbance in the normal flow of foot traffic. Signs most people would never notice, but Zithrak had spent decades learning to spot other predators. He found her positioned on a building across from the Colonial Administration offices. Her camouflage was excellent, blending her reptilian form almost perfectly with the structure. Almost, but not quite. Vexicor, he said quietly, appearing beside her hiding spot. The Krell assassin hissed in surprise, her camouflage failing as she spun to face him. Her hand moved toward a weapon, then stopped when she recognized him. Zithrak, she said, her voice carrying the distinctive click of her species. The unfailing. Or should I say the failed. The guilds are talking about you. They say you went soft. I made a choice, Zithrak replied. The same choice I am offering you now. I do not fail contracts, neither did I. 500 successful eliminations. Then I met my 501st target and learned something important. Vexcor's eyes narrowed. What could a target possibly teach you? That there are things worth more than payment. Come with me. Before you kill Morrison, let me show you what I learned. This is a trick, no trick. Just conversation. The same conversation Morrison had with me. If after hearing what I have to say you still wish to complete your contract, I will not stop you. But you should understand what you would be destroying. The Krell considered this. Professional curiosity warred with suspicion in her expression. Finally, she nodded. 1 hour. Then I complete my work. Zithrak took her to the memorial garden, explained the trees, told her Claire Morrison's story and the stories of dozens of other humans who had chosen meaning over survival. Vexcor listened with growing confusion. This is inefficient, she said, echoing Zithrak's own words from weeks before. Why would they choose death? Because they chose something greater than themselves, Zithrak explained. Come, there is more to see. He showed her the school, the medical center, the community spaces where humans gathered, introduced her to Morrison himself, who welcomed her with the same calm friendliness he had shown Zithrak. Another assassin, Morrison said pleasantly, shaking Vexcor's clawed hand. Welcome to New Portland. Coffee? Vexcor stared at him. You know I am here to kill you. Zithrak mentioned it, yeah, but you're here talking instead of killing, which means you're curious. Curiosity is good. It means you're thinking. They sat in the same cafe at the same table. Morrison ordered 3 coffees and began explaining his philosophy. About choosing to live despite knowing death was inevitable. About finding meaning in connection. About building something worth protecting. Vexcor listened, her reptilian features difficult to read. But Zithrak could see the same confusion he had felt. The same slow realization that their lives of assassination had been missing something fundamental. By the end of the day, Vexcor sent a message to the Trithari Commerce Guild terminating her contract. This is madness, she said. But there was wonder in her voice rather than anger. I have spent my entire adult life perfecting the art of death. And this human shows me I have been wasting my time. Not wasting, Morrison corrected gently. Just missing the larger picture. You're skilled at ending lives. Now imagine using those skills to protect lives instead. The colony could use another security consultant. Word spread through the assassin community quickly. Zithrak the Unfailing had not only failed a contract, he was actively converting other assassins. The story became a strange legend. Some thought it was a joke. Others were curious. A few were angry at what they saw as a betrayal of their profession. The Trithari kept posting new contracts. The third assassin, a Gentari mind hunter named Kriath, lasted 4 days before abandoning her contract and requesting to speak with Morrison about alternative perspectives on life and death. The fourth assassin never even attempted the kill. He sent a message to Zithrak asking if the colony needed a surveillance specialist. Within 6 months, New Portland had acquired an unusual reputation across the galaxy. It was the place where assassins went to retire, the colony where the deadliest killers in known space learned to drink coffee and attend community meetings. The human colonial authorities didn't quite know what to make of it. Director Hayes called a meeting with Morrison and Zithrak to discuss the situation. "We now have 7 former assassins living in the colony," she said, reviewing her datapad. 7 beings who collectively have eliminated over 2,000 targets. "And you're telling me they're all reformed?" "They're all choosing a different path," Morrison corrected. "Same as Zithrak did. They're learning to value life instead of ending it. And if they change their minds," Zithrak spoke up, "we monitor each other. We understand the mindset because we shared it. If any of us showed signs of returning to assassination, the others would intervene. We have formed a community of accountability." Hayes considered this. "The crime rate in the colony has dropped to nearly 0 since you all arrived. People feel safer, and your security recommendations have been excellent. I suppose I can't argue with results." She approved a formal program. The colony would welcome former assassins who wanted to change their lives, offering them work in security and community protection. In return, they would share their knowledge to help defend against future threats. The program grew. More assassins came, drawn by curiosity or exhaustion with their violent lives. Not all of them stayed. Some found civilian life too boring or too difficult, but many did stay, forming a unique community within the larger colony. Zithrak found himself in an unexpected role as a mentor and counselor. Other assassins came to him with questions about how to adapt to normal life, how to form friendships, how to find purpose beyond killing. He shared what Morrison had taught him, passing on the lessons about meaning and connection. Morrison himself seemed to take it all in stride. He continued his regular work, had coffee every morning, volunteered at the school on weekends. The fact that he was surrounded by former killers didn't seem to bother him at all. "Doesn't it worry you?" Zithrak asked him one morning at their usual table. "You are sitting in a cafe with beings who have collectively killed thousands." "I'm sitting in a cafe with friends," Morrison corrected. "Yes, you all have pasts, we all do. But you're choosing every day to be better than you were. That's what matters." A year after Zithrak's arrival, the colony held a ceremony. They planted a new section in the memorial garden, but this time the trees weren't for the dead. They were for new beginnings. Each former assassin planted a tree representing their choice to change. Zithrak chose a tall oak, similar to the one planted for Claire Morrison. As he dug the hole and settled the young tree into the earth, he thought about his 500 contracts. All those deaths he could never undo. All those lives ended for payment and pride. He couldn't change his past, but he could choose his future. Morrison stood beside him as he finished planting. "You know," the human said quietly, "when I saw you on that rooftop a year ago, I wasn't sure what would happen. But I figured if I was going to die, I might as well try something interesting first." "You changed my entire existence with your irrational optimism," Zithrak replied. "I went from 500 meaningless kills to a year of actual purpose. I consider our meeting the most significant moment of my life." "That's what humans do," Morrison said with a smile. "We stumble into the galaxy, barely holding our technology together, and somehow convince the universe's perfect killers to try coffee instead of murder. Your species is profoundly illogical, and you love us for it." Zithrak considered this. Love was an emotion the Velkari were supposedly incapable of feeling. Yet standing here in the memorial garden, surrounded by trees representing both sacrifice and new beginnings, watching Morrison smile at some private joke, he couldn't deny the truth. "Yes," he admitted quietly, "I believe I do." That evening, a new ship entered orbit around New Portland. The colony's sensors tracked it automatically. Zithrak received an alert on his communicator. Another visitor, possibly another assassin. He contacted Morrison. "We have incoming. Could be another contract hunter. Want to go talk to them?" Morrison asked. "Might save everyone some trouble." "I will prepare the cafe," Zithrak replied. "Same table?" "Same table. I'll bring extra coffee cups." Aboard the ship, a young Velkari assassin named Kithral reviewed her first major contract. Eliminate the traitor Zithrak, the one who had corrupted the reputation of their people. Secondary target, the human Jake Morrison who had caused this corruption. She studied their patterns, planned her approach, prepared her weapons. This would be her chance to prove herself worthy, to show that the Velkari were still the galaxy's most feared assassins. But as she reviewed the files, something caught her attention. A note about a cafe where Zithrak and Morrison frequently met, where they drank something. The 48 hours ended at midnight. Sithrak sat in his ship staring at his weapons array. His plasma rifle was fully charged and ready. His targeting computer was calibrated. His camouflage suit was functional. Everything was prepared for the kill. He had completed 500 contracts using these same tools. The routine was familiar and comfortable. Observe the target. Calculate the approach. Execute the shot. Confirm the kill. Collect payment. Move to the next contract. Simple, efficient, meaningless. That last thought surprised him. Where had it come from? His contracts had always had meaning. They served a purpose. Clients paid for a service, and he provided that service. The galaxy had rules, and he operated within them. But Morrison's words kept echoing in his mind. 502. 503. How many meaningless deaths until your own life ends just as meaninglessly? Sithrak pulled up his contract history on his computer. 500 names appeared on the screen. He scrolled through them slowly, trying to remember each one. A few stood out. The crime lord who had fought back with surprising skill. The politician who had offered him triple the contract price to switch sides. The smuggler who had actually managed to wound him before dying. But most of them blurred together. Faces without personality, deaths without context. He had ended their lives without knowing anything about them. Without caring who they were or what they meant to others. Had any of them been like Morrison? Had any of them had friends who would plant trees in their memory? Had any of them taught children or built communities or chosen to care despite the risks? He would never know. His communicator buzzed. A message from the Trithari Commerce Guild marked urgent. He opened it. Velkari Sithrak, your contract deadline has passed. Confirm status of target Morrison immediately. Payment is waiting upon proof of completion. Sithrak stared at the message. All he had to do was go to the cafe in the morning. Morrison would be there at 7:15 like always. One shot, clean and simple. Contract 501 complete. Then what? He thought about the memorial garden. About Claire Morrison choosing to save 200 people instead of herself. About all those trees representing humans who had decided that something mattered more than their own survival. He thought about the children in the school, learning to help each other. About the community gathering. All those people connected by choice rather than necessity. About Dr. Williams fighting death every day, knowing she couldn't always win but trying anyway. He thought about Morrison himself. A man who had died 3 times and learned not to fear it, who had lost someone he loved and chose to keep loving others, who was offering friendship to someone sent to kill him. Sithrak looked at his rifle, at his 500 completed contracts, at the message from the Trithari demanding confirmation. Then he made a choice. He opened a secure channel to the Trithari Commerce Guild. The same administrator who had hired him appeared on the screen, looking impatient. Finally, the Trithari said, "We were beginning to worry. Is Morrison eliminated?" "No," Sithrak replied. Silence. The administrator's expression shifted from impatience to confusion to anger in quick succession. "Explain yourself, assassin." The contract was clear. The payment was generous. Why has Morrison not been eliminated? Because killing him would be a waste, Sithrak said slowly, working through his reasoning as he spoke. I have completed 500 contracts for various clients. I have ended 500 lives. None of them changed anything. None of them mattered. Morrison matters. He cost us billions in lost profit. He showed me something I had never seen before, Sithrak continued. Purpose, connection, meaning. Things your money cannot buy and my weapons cannot destroy. I will not kill him. The administrator's face darkened. You were paid to complete this contract. The Velkari have a reputation for reliability. Are you saying you intend to fail? I am saying the contract is terminated. I am returning your payment in full. Consider this my resignation from your employment. You cannot resign from a contract mid-execution. I just did. Sithrak ended the communication before the administrator could respond. He sat in silence for a moment, processing what he had done. In his entire career, he had never failed a contract. Never refused a job. Never walked away from payment. It felt strange. It felt uncomfortable. It felt right. He sent a message to Morrison, simple and direct. Contract terminated, you live. I would like to continue our conversation. The response came almost immediately. Best news I've gotten all week. Same cafe 7:15 tomorrow morning. Coffee is on me. Sithrak found himself looking forward to the morning in a way he had never anticipated. Not because of a contract or a kill, but because of coffee with a friend. The word felt odd in his mind. Friend. He had never had one before. Morning came slowly. Zithrak spent the time organizing his thoughts. He had made a choice that would have consequences. The Trithari would not take this well. His reputation among other assassins would be damaged. The Velkari Council of Hunters would demand an explanation. None of that seemed to matter as much as it should have. At 7:15 exactly, he entered the cafe. Morrison was already there, 2 cups of coffee waiting. The human's smile was genuine and warm. "You came," Morrison said as Zithrak sat down. "I said I would." "Yeah, but you could have just shot me from the rooftop again. Easier that way." "Easier," Zithrak agreed, "but not better." They drank their coffee in comfortable silence for a moment. Other cafe patrons glanced at them curiously but didn't seem alarmed. A few even nodded greetings. "So what happens now?" Morrison asked. "The Trithari won't be happy about this. They will likely hire another assassin," Zithrak said. "Someone to finish the contract I refused. And I will prevent them from succeeding." Morrison raised his eyebrows. "You're going to protect me? That's a significant career change." "My career as an assassin is over," Zithrak stated. "I cannot return to that work. Not after understanding what it truly means. 500 meaningless deaths. I will not add a 501st. What will you do instead?" Zithrak had been considering this question all night. "I do not know. I have only ever been an assassin. I have no other skills, no other purpose." Morrison leaned back in his chair thinking, "Actually, I might have an idea. The colony could use a security consultant. Someone who understands how assassins think, how they operate. Someone who could help us identify and prevent threats. The pay wouldn't be anything like what you're used to, but it's honest work." "You would trust me in such a position? After I came here to kill you?" "You chose not to kill me," Morrison pointed out. "That counts for a lot. Besides, who better to protect against assassins than someone who used to be one?" The offer was genuine. Zithrak could see it in Morrison's face, hear it in his voice. The human was offering him not just a job, but a purpose, a way to use his skills for something other than death. "I accept," he said. Morrison grinned. "Great. Fair warning, though, colony work is boring compared to assassination. Lots of paperwork, training sessions, community meetings. You'll probably hate it." "I have spent my entire life ending lives," Zithrak replied. "Perhaps it is time I learned how to protect them instead." They finished their coffee and walked to the Colonial Administration building together. Morrison introduced Zithrak to the colony director, a woman named Patricia Hayes who looked skeptical at first, but agreed to a trial period after Morrison explained the situation. "We'll need to set up proper credentials," Hayes said, reviewing forms on her datapad. "Background checks, security clearances, the whole process. It'll take a few weeks." "I have killed 500 people across 20 star systems," Zithrak said. "I doubt I will pass most background checks." Hayes smiled slightly. "We're a frontier colony. We're more interested in who you are now than who you were before. Morrison trusts you. That's enough for me to give you a chance." Over the following days, Zithrak began his new life. Morrison helped him find an apartment in the colony, introduced him to more people, showed him how humans built their communities and maintained their peace. The work was indeed very different from assassination. Instead of studying targets, Zithrak studied security systems. Instead of planning kills, he planned defensive strategies. Instead of working alone, he worked with teams of humans who asked his opinions and valued his input. It was strange. It was uncomfortable. It was better. The Trithari Commerce Guild posted a new contract within a week. This time the target list included both Morrison and Zithrak. The payment was double the original amount. When Morrison heard the news, he just laughed. "Well, now we're both targets. Welcome to the club. You are not concerned?" Zithrak asked. "I've been a target before. I'll probably be a target again. The important thing is that we know it's coming, and we have you to help spot the threat. That's more advantage than most people get. The next assassin may be more skilled than I was." "Maybe," Morrison agreed. "Or maybe they'll sit down for coffee and realize there are better ways to live." "Worked on you, didn't it?" Zithrak considered this. The idea that he might be able to convince other assassins to change their paths seemed unlikely. Yet here he was, a former perfect killer, now working to protect life instead of ending it. If he could change, perhaps others could too. "We should prepare," he said. The second morning, Zithrak met Morrison at the cafe again. The human was already there, 2 cups of coffee waiting. The assassin was starting to understand this was a ritual for Morrison. This morning coffee. A small moment of peace before the day began. "Sleep well?" Morrison asked as Zithrak sat down. "Velkari require minimal rest," Zithrak replied. "I spent the night reviewing my contract parameters. And I am still uncertain. This has never happened before." Morrison smiled. "Uncertainty means you're thinking. That's good. Today I want to show you something different. We're going to talk about fear." He pulled out his datapad and brought up a file. Medical records, Zithrak realized. Morrison's own medical history. 6 years ago, I was serving on a cargo ship called the Dakota, Morrison began. We were hauling supplies between colonies. Simple work, boring most of the time. Then during a routine jump, something went wrong with the drive system, tore a hole in the hull about 2 meters wide. He scrolled through the records showing Zithrak images of the damage. I was in the cargo bay when it happened. Got pulled toward the breach along with about half our supplies. Managed to grab onto a support beam. Hung there while everything around me got sucked into space. The cold hit first, then the pressure change. My lungs tried to explode. Blood vessels in my eyes burst. I could feel myself dying. Morrison's voice remained calm as he described this like he was talking about a trip to the store. The crew managed to seal the breach after 6 minutes. They pulled me back inside, got me to medical. I was clinically dead for about 90 seconds before they revived me. Brain damage was minimal, mostly because the cold slowed everything down. But I remember those 6 minutes very clearly. "Why are you telling me this?" Zithrak asked. "Because that's when I stopped being afraid of death," Morrison said simply. "I'd felt it. I knew what it was like. The fear lost its power over me. After that, everything else seemed manageable." He scrolled to another file. 2 years later, mining station accident. Reactor overload. I was doing an inspection when it happened. Spent 4 hours in a shelter with failing life support while the crew fought the meltdown. Oxygen got so low I passed out. Died again for about 40 seconds, another file. Year after that, shuttle crash. Pilot error during landing. Ship came down hard, broke apart. I was one of 3 survivors out of 12 passengers. Took rescue teams 8 hours to cut us out of the wreckage. I watched 2 people die while we waited. Zithrak examined the records carefully. Each incident was documented with medical precision. Morrison had experienced severe trauma multiple times. By any logical measure, he should be psychologically damaged. Instead, he seemed more stable than most humans the assassin had observed. Most beings would develop fear after such experiences, Zithrak observed. You claim the opposite occurred. I learned that death is just a thing that happens, Morrison explained. It's not good or bad. It's not punishment or reward, it just is. Once I accepted that, once I really understood it, I stopped letting it control my choices. I started making decisions based on what mattered, not on what was safe. They left the cafe and walked to the colony's medical center. Morrison had arranged a visit to the trauma ward, where doctors treated serious injuries and illnesses. He introduced Zithrak to a doctor named Karen Williams, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and steady hands. Dr. Williams showed them around the ward. Patients in various states of recovery filled the beds. Some had been injured in industrial accidents. Others had contracted diseases. A few were simply old, their bodies failing despite medical technology. We lose about 1 patient a week, Williams said quietly. Colony medicine is good, but it's not perfect. Sometimes people are just too hurt or too sick or too old. We do everything we can, but death still wins sometimes. She stopped beside a bed where a man in his 70s lay sleeping. His breathing was shallow and labored. This is Howard Chen. Been here 3 weeks. His heart is failing. We don't have the equipment for a transplant, and he's too weak to survive the trip to a major medical center. He has maybe a week left, does he know? Morrison asked gently. He knows, Williams confirmed. We told him yesterday. You know what he said? He asked if we could set up a video call so he could talk to his grandchildren one more time. Wanted to tell them he loved them. That was his priority. Zithrak watched the old man sleep. By Velkari standards, Howard Chen had lived a long life. But humans measured life differently. They counted in experiences and connections, not just years. Do you fear death, Dr. Williams? Zithrak asked suddenly. She considered the question carefully. I respect it. I fight against it every day in this ward. But fear it? No, death is part of life. My job is to give people as much good life as possible before death comes. Some days I win, some days I don't. Either way, what matters is that I tried. Morrison and Zithrak left the medical center and walked to a nearby park. They sat on a bench overlooking a pond where children played, throwing stones into the water and laughing at the splashes. Here's what I've learned, Morrison said, watching the children. Humans die. We're fragile. We break easily. Disease kills us. Accidents kill us. Time kills us. We know this. We've always known this. But instead of letting that knowledge paralyze us, we use it to decide what matters. He gestured at the playing children. Those kids know about death. They've been to funerals. They've lost grandparents, maybe friends. But they're still playing. Still laughing. Still finding joy. That's not stupidity. That's courage. Velkari are taught that courage is the absence of fear, Zithrak said. That's not courage, Morrison countered. That's just not caring. Real courage is being afraid and doing the thing anyway. Real courage is knowing you could die and choosing to live fully despite that knowledge. They spent the afternoon talking. Morrison shared more stories from his life. Times he had been afraid and acted anyway. Decisions he had made that could have killed him but felt important enough to risk. Relationships he had built knowing they would eventually end. I had a partner once, Morrison said quietly. Her name was Nicole. We met during my first colony assignment. Fell in love fast, the way people do when they're young and stupid. We had 3 years together. Then her ship disappeared during a routine supply run. Never found any wreckage. Never knew what happened. She was just gone. He was quiet for a moment, staring at the pond. That hurt worse than dying myself. Worse than the vacuum exposure or the reactor scare or the crash. Because I couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't fix it. Could only feel the loss. And I thought about giving up on relationships after that. Thought maybe it was easier to be alone. But you did not, Zithrak observed, thinking of the friends he had met at Morrison's gathering. No, Morrison agreed, because being alone would mean Nicole's death won that fight. Would mean fear got to make my choices. So I kept connecting with people, kept building friendships, kept caring, even though I knew any of them could disappear tomorrow. That's what humans do. We care anyway. As evening approached, Morrison took Zithrak to the colony's observation deck. They stood looking out at the stars, the vast darkness of space surrounding their small human settlement. You've killed 500 people, Morrison said. I'm guessing most of them were afraid when they died. They begged, or they fought, or they tried to run. Most did, yes, Zithrak confirmed. I won't do any of that, Morrison said calmly. If tomorrow you decide to complete your contract, I won't beg. Won't fight, won't run. I'll accept it. Because I've already died 3 times. I know what's on the other side. Nothing scary there. Just silence, then why resist at all? Why offer me these 2 days? Morrison turned to face the assassin directly. Because while I'm not afraid of dying, I'm very interested in living. And I think maybe you should be too. You've spent your whole life ending lives. But have you ever really lived one? Have you ever cared about something beyond your next contract? Have you ever had a friend? The question hit Zithrak harder than any weapon ever had. In all his years, all his contracts, all his experiences, he had never had what Morrison was describing. He had colleagues. He had contacts. He had targets. But friends? People who cared about him not for what he could do, but simply because he existed? Never. The Trithari want me dead because I cost them money, Morrison continued. That's all I am to them. A problem to solve. But to the people in this colony, I'm a friend, a volunteer teacher, someone who makes them laugh, someone who listens when they need to talk. My life has meaning beyond my economic value. Can you say the same? Zithrak had no answer. He had never thought about his life in those terms. He was an assassin. That was his purpose, his identity, his entire existence. Tomorrow is your decision day, Morrison said. You'll either kill me or you won't. Either way, I want you to think about what comes after. You complete this contract, collect your payment, and then what? Contract 502? 503? How many meaningless deaths until your own life ends just as meaninglessly? They stood in silence for a long time, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, other assassins were completing other contracts. Other people were dying for reasons that wouldn't matter in a year, a month, or even a day. Finally, Morrison spoke again. I'm going home now. Zithrak picked up the coffee cup. He had never shared a drink with a target before. In 500 contracts, this moment was completely new. The coffee was hot and bitter with a strange sweetness underneath. Humans apparently enjoyed this taste. You detected my position, Zithrak said, making it a statement rather than a question. How? Jake Morrison smiled. Honestly? Lucky guess. I've had a weird feeling all week that someone was watching me. Then this morning I saw a tiny reflection off something on that rooftop. Could have been nothing. Could have been a rifle scope. I figured I'd find out. You risked your life on a guess. I risk my life getting out of bed every morning, Morrison replied. Space is dangerous. Colonies fail. Ships explode. Asteroids hit things. If I spent my time being scared of everything that could kill me, I'd never do anything interesting. Zithrak studied the human more carefully. Morrison's file hadn't mentioned this attitude. The Trithari had described him as a simple administrator who had gotten lucky during negotiations. They hadn't mentioned that he was either incredibly brave or completely insane. The Trithari have paid me a substantial amount to end your life, Zithrak explained. I do not fail contracts. I have never failed a contract. First time for everything, Morrison said cheerfully. How much did they pay you? Zithrak told him. It was a considerable sum, enough to purchase a small ship or fund a comfortable retirement on most worlds. Morrison whistled softly. I'm almost flattered they think I'm worth that much. Okay, here's my counteroffer. Don't kill me today. Give me 48 hours. Let me show you some things about humans in this colony. If after 2 days you still think killing me is the right choice, I won't try to stop you. Why would I agree to this? Curiosity? Morrison suggested. You've killed 500 people. How many of them did you actually know anything about? How many did you understand before you pulled the trigger? I'm offering you something different. Information, context, maybe even a story worth remembering. The proposal was illogical. Zithrak should refuse, complete his contract, and leave. Delay only increased risk. Yet something about Morrison's calm certainty made him pause. The human wasn't pleading for his life, wasn't offering money or threats. He was simply asking for time. 2 days, Zithrak heard himself say. Then I complete my contract. Fair enough, Morrison agreed. He stood and gestured toward the door. Come on, first stop is the Memorial Garden. You should see it. They walked through the colony streets together, an odd pair that drew curious looks from passing humans. Zithrak kept his 6 eyes moving, tracking potential threats and escape routes out of habit. Morrison walked with his hands in his pockets, completely relaxed. The Memorial Garden occupied a large space near the colony's edge. Rows of trees grew in organized patterns, each one carefully tended. Small plaques sat at the base of every tree, engraved with names and dates. We plant a tree for every colonist who dies, Morrison explained as they walked between the rows. Started during our first year here. Ship crash killed 37 people, including the original colony director. We didn't have much, but we had seeds from Earth, so we planted trees. He stopped beside a young oak tree, its leaves bright green in the morning sun. His hand touched the bark gently, almost lovingly. My sister Claire, he said quietly. Year 2 of the colony. Reactor accident. The containment system started failing during a solar storm. She was the chief engineer on duty. She could have evacuated with everyone else. Instead, she stayed at her post and manually vented the core, saved 200 people. The radiation killed her in about 4 minutes. Zithrak examined the plaque. Claire Morrison, it read. She chose others over herself. Why did she stay? He asked. Because 200 lives mattered more than one, Morrison answered. That's the thing about humans. We make these calculations all the time. We decide that some things are worth dying for. Family, friends, strangers we've never met. Ideas we believe in. We're not the strongest species. We're not the fastest or the smartest. But we're really good at deciding that our lives mean something. They walked further into the garden. Morrison pointed out other trees sharing their stories. A doctor who had died treating patients during an outbreak. A teacher who had shielded students during a structural collapse. A pilot who had crashed her shuttle away from populated areas rather than ejecting and letting it hit homes. Every story followed the same pattern. Humans choosing to die so others could live. Choosing meaning over survival. This is inefficient, Zithrak observed. These people could have survived. They chose death instead. They chose purpose, Morrison corrected. There's a difference. Survival for its own sake doesn't mean much. But survival with purpose, with connection to others, with something worth protecting, that matters. That's what makes life valuable. Zithrak processed this information through his training. The Velkari were taught that attachment was weakness. Emotion clouded judgment. The only thing that mattered was completing the mission. These humans seemed to believe the exact opposite. Their second stop was the colony's school. Children of various ages filled the classrooms and playgrounds. Morrison led Zithrak to an observation window, where they could watch without disturbing the students. In one classroom, young children were learning basic mathematics. A girl struggled with a problem, her face scrunched in concentration. The boy sitting next to her leaned over and quietly explained the concept in a different way. The girl's face brightened with understanding. She smiled at the boy in gratitude. In another room, older students were working on a group project, building something with scraps of metal and wire. They argued about the best approach, voices rising in passionate debate, but no one got angry. They listened to each other, tried different ideas, and worked together toward a solution. On the playground, a child fell and scraped his knee. He started crying. 3 other children immediately ran over to help. One got a teacher. Another offered a hug. The third sat with the injured child and told him a joke to make him laugh. "We teach them to care," Morrison said, watching the scene. "Not just about themselves or their own success. We teach them to notice when others need help, to work together, to value each other. It makes them vulnerable in some ways, but it also makes them strong in others." Velkari children are raised differently, Zithrak said. "We are taught independence, self-reliance. Attachment is discouraged. How does that feel?" Morrison asked. The question caught Zithrak off guard. No one had ever asked him how anything felt. Feelings were irrelevant to his work. "I do not understand the question," he admitted. "Growing up without connection, without people who care about you just because you exist, how does that feel?" Zithrak had no answer. He had never considered it before. His childhood was training. His adult life was contracts. There was no space for anything else. They spent the afternoon moving through the colony. Morrison introduced Zithrak to people he knew, a shop owner who gave discounts to struggling families, a mechanic who repaired equipment for free when people couldn't afford to pay, a group of volunteers who spent their weekends maintaining the public spaces. Everyone Morrison introduced him to welcomed Zithrak without fear, despite his obvious alien nature and fearsome appearance. They offered handshakes, asked questions about his species, and invited him to community events. As evening approached, Morrison brought him to a small gathering at his apartment. About 15 humans crowded into the space, talking, laughing, and sharing food. They welcomed Zithrak immediately, making space for him and offering him various dishes to try. A woman named Lisa told embarrassing stories about her husband while he protested good-naturedly. A man named Greg showed pictures of his new daughter, his face glowing with pride. A woman named Sophie played guitar while others sang along, their voices enthusiastic even when they hit wrong notes. Zithrak sat in the corner, observing everything. These humans had no logical reason to be this happy. They lived on a frontier colony far from Earth, surrounded by the dangers of space. Any number of disasters could destroy their home. Yet they chose joy anyway, chose connection, chose to care about each other despite knowing how easily it could all end. "This is what we do," Morrison said quietly, sitting down next to the assassin. "We build communities in the middle of nothing. We create meaning in an uncaring universe. We make things matter through sheer stubborn will and irrational hope." Zithrak watched a young couple across the room, holding hands and smiling at some private joke. He watched Greg carefully cradling his daughter's picture like it was the most precious thing in existence. He watched Lisa lean against her husband, comfortable and safe. "I have killed 500 beings," he said slowly. "I cannot remember most of their names." Morrison nodded. "That's the thing about killing. It's easy to forget. But living, really living with purpose and connection, that's what people remember. That's what leaves a mark on the universe." The gathering continued late into the evening. As it wound down and people began leaving, each one made a point to say goodbye to Zithrak personally. They thanked him for coming, told him he was welcome back anytime, meant it sincerely. When everyone had gone, Morrison walked the assassin back toward his ship. "One day down," Morrison said, "still planning to kill me." The Velkari were the most feared killers in the galaxy. Their reputation spread across 20 star systems like a dark shadow. They had 6 eyes that could see heat, movement, and even the faint electrical signals of a beating heart. Their reflexes were faster than thought itself. Most importantly, they felt nothing when they killed. No guilt, no hesitation, no mercy. Zithrak was the best of them all. He had completed 500 contracts without a single mistake. Kings, generals, crime lords, and rebels had all fallen to his weapons. Some had begged for their lives. Others had tried to fight back. A few had attempted to hide. None of it mattered. Zithrak always finished his work. His new assignment arrived on a cold morning aboard his ship. The target file was surprisingly thin. A human named Jake Morrison, age 32, serving as a lieutenant commander in the human colonial fleet. The contract came from the Trithari Commerce Guild, a powerful trading organization that controlled shipping routes across 6 sectors. Zithrak read through the details with mild interest. Humans were new to galactic society, barely 3 decades since first contact. They were weak by most standards. Their bones broke easily. Their skin offered no natural protection. They needed to breathe oxygen constantly and would die within minutes without it. They were emotional creatures who formed attachments and made decisions based on feelings rather than logic. The file explained that Jake Morrison had interfered with a mining deal. The Trithari had offered to buy rights to an asteroid belt near the human colony of New Portland. Morrison had reviewed their proposal and publicly called it unfair. He had shown that the Trithari were offering 40% less than the minerals were worth. The deal fell apart. The Trithari lost billions in potential profit. Now they wanted Morrison dead. Zithrak calculated the difficulty level as he prepared his ship for travel. Based on human physiology and Morrison's lack of combat training, this would be one of his easiest contracts. He estimated a 99% success rate. The only variable was which method to use. A long-range shot seemed most efficient. The journey to New Portland took 6 days. Zithrak spent the time studying his target's habits. Morrison lived alone in a small apartment near the Colonial Administration building. He woke early each morning and walked 3 blocks to a cafe called the Morning Star. He always ordered the same thing, a drink humans called coffee and a pastry. He sat at the same table by the window and read news reports on his datapad for exactly 45 minutes. After breakfast, Morrison would walk to his office. He worked regular hours, nothing unusual. In the evenings, he sometimes met friends at various restaurants. Twice a week, he attended what humans called a gym, where they deliberately exhausted themselves lifting heavy objects. On weekends, he volunteered at the colony school, teaching children about space navigation. The pattern was so predictable, it was almost insulting. Zithrak had tracked targets who changed their routes daily, who hired bodyguards, who lived in fortified compounds. Morrison did none of these things. He walked the same streets at the same times like he had no enemies in the universe. Zithrak arrived at New Portland on a Tuesday morning. The colony was small by galactic standards, home to about 50,000 humans. The buildings were simple and functional, built from local materials. Gardens grew between structures filled with plants from Earth. Children played in parks. People greeted each other on the streets. The assassin found it strange how casual everything seemed. These humans had traveled across the stars to build a new home on an alien world. Yet they acted as if danger didn't exist. They left their doors unlocked. They trusted strangers. They smiled at people they had never met. On Wednesday morning, Zithrak positioned himself on a rooftop overlooking the Morning Star Cafe. He activated his camouflage suit, becoming nearly invisible. His plasma rifle hummed quietly as it charged. Through his scope, he could see inside the cafe clearly. The morning crowd was light, just a few early customers. At exactly 7:15, Jake Morrison entered the cafe. He was average height for a human, with dark hair and an easy smile. He wore casual clothes, nothing formal. He ordered his coffee and pastry from a young woman behind the counter, exchanging a few words that made her laugh. Then he took his usual seat by the window. Zithrak settled his aim. The targeting computer painted a bright circle over Morrison's chest. Range was 140 meters. Wind was minimal. No obstructions. He could fire now and be off-world within the hour. His finger moved to the trigger. He began the squeeze. Then Morrison looked up. His eyes moved from his datapad and focused directly on Zithrak's position. The human shouldn't have been able to see him. The camouflage was perfect. The distance was too far. The angle was wrong. Yet Morrison stared right at the spot where the assassin crouched. The human didn't panic. Didn't run. Didn't call for help. He simply smiled, a small and knowing expression. Then he raised his coffee cup in a casual salute as if toasting a friend across a crowded room. After that, he went back to reading his datapad. Zithrak held perfectly still, confusion flooding his normally clear mind. Had Morrison actually seen him? Was it just a coincidence? Was this some kind of trick? His communicator buzzed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as unknown. The signal bounced through multiple relay stations to hide its origin. Zithrak opened it carefully, checking for viruses or traps. The message was simple text, written in standard galactic common language. It read, "Rooftop sniper. Plasma rifle Valkyrie model, if I'm guessing right. There's a cafe across from my building called the Morning Star. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Let's have a conversation before you do whatever you came here to do. Might save us both some trouble." Signed, Jake. Zithrak read the message 3 times. In 500 contracts, nothing like this had ever happened. Targets ran. They hid, they fought. They never invited their assassin to coffee. He should abort the mission immediately. Relocate to a new position. Strike from a different angle. That was the professional approach. That was his training. Instead, Zithrak found himself climbing down from the rooftop. He adjusted his suit to look like normal clothing. A simple jacket and pants that would blend with the human population. He walked across the street, pushed open the cafe door, and stepped inside. Jake Morrison sat at his table, watching the entrance. When Zithrak entered, the human gestured to the empty chair across from him. 2 cups of coffee waited on the table, steam rising from both. "I wasn't completely sure you'd come," Morrison said as the assassin sat down. His voice was calm, conversational. Most professionals would have just moved to a new location and tried again later. Zithrak studied the human with all 6 eyes. Morrison showed no signs of fear. His heart rate was normal. His hands were steady. He sipped his coffee like this was an ordinary morning. "You should be terrified," Zithrak said quietly. Morrison considered this for a moment, then shrugged. "Yeah, probably. But I've been through the whole terror thing already. It loses its power after a while." The assassin didn't understand. Fear was a survival instinct. It kept creatures alive. Losing it should be impossible. "I am Valkyrie," he said. "I have ended 500 lives. You are my 501st contract." "That's quite a resume," Morrison replied. He pushed the second coffee cup across the table. "Look, I'm guessing the Trithari hired you. They're still upset about that mining deal. I get it. I cost them a lot of money. But here's the thing, you came all this way. The least I can do is offer you coffee before you kill me. It seems polite."